Do we have all our panelists? Amal, please confirm.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, we've got them all.
All are in.
Excellent. I will start in 1 minute. Amal, in the meantime, you can already put up the PowerPoint, please. Or our panel 3.
Sure.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us on our third panel already today. And I think we have some really early birds here from America joining us, so that is very much appreciated. I don't know to what extent the participants have participated in our previous panels, but let me just remind you basically the very short backdrop of the work that we have engaged and the purpose of this panel today. Can I move on to the next slide, please? So as you will be aware, we are part of C20, the civil society branch, if you wish, of G20, G20 being the group of 20 biggest economies in the world. Our specific purpose is to inform the G20 leaders as they will meet in September in Delhi around issues in education and digital transformation. And we want to do this in an evidence-based manner, and we want to do it also by identifying the best practices that are out there. That's what we call the Udarans. So that is the objective. In this work, as we move to the next slide, we are inspired by the chair of C20, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, or Amma, as we call her, and her view, her compassionate view on education and digital transformation. A quote to illustrate this is just in front of you, saying that education should spread light within and outside, instill awareness, and strengthen the deep bond between the student and his nation, the world, his fellow human beings, and other creatures, nature, and God. She inspires our work. She is the embodiment of compassion and action. And I think it's a great opportunity for us all, as we come from different parts of the world, to see how we can meaningfully inform G20 by proposing recommendations, policy recommendations that are maybe slightly different or that focus on particular aspects as we think are relevant for our work. To do this today on this important topic of technology-enabled learning and future of education, I'm very pleased to welcome a very high-level panel that we were able to bring together in a very short time. Allow me to briefly introduce each of them before opening the floor for discussion and interventions from your side. So, first of all, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, and you'll have to apologize my sometimes poor pronunciation. Dr. Rukmini is the Chief Executive Officer of Pratham Education Foundation. Rukmini has played a major role in designing and supporting large-scale partnerships with state governments in India for improving children's learning outcomes. She has worked extensively in Pratham's education program in rural and urban areas. She is an expert in designing and delivering education intervention programs and has played the key roles in developing and implementing Pratham's partnership programs with government. In 2008, Rukmini received the Maulana Abdul Kalam Shiksha Purasakar Award by the government of Bihar, India. She was actually the first recipient of this award. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome, Dr. Rukmini. Then allow me to move on to Dr. William Poucher. And again, thank you for joining us at this early time in your country. William Bill Poucher is the director and founding president of International Collegiate Programming Contest, or under the acronym of ICPC. And he is also a professor of computer science at Baylor University. He is the recipient of not less than 12 awards. A few to mention is the IBM Faculty Award, the University of Warsaw in Poland Medal, and the Baylor University Outstanding Professor Award. He is a principal consultant and software developer. He develops systems in energy management, communication, synthetic vaccine, and global enterprise tools. He founded the ICPC, International Collegiate Programming Contest, to make sure future generations from universities all over the world will have the option to pursue excellence in the art and science of computing with their peers. As a reference, in 2018, from what I understand, the ICPC served over 50,000 students from 3,200 universities in 115 countries. So that is quite impressive. Thank you so much again, sir, for joining us here this morning. Then I would like to welcome Mrs. Mette Bjerkas, must be from Norway, from what I read, senior advisor, Red Barna Save the Children in Norway. Mette is a journalist, teacher, and textbook author in social sciences. She's working as a senior advisor education for Save the Children in Norway, and previously she was the head of education in or at the United Nations Association of Norway, and also the head of immigrants in a school in Bærum city in Oslo. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome here, Mette. Then I would like to introduce Sri Rajneesh Kumar, who is currently the Director, Digital Education, Department of School Education, Ministry of Education, Government of India. He completed his bachelor in mechanical engineering from Malviya National Institute of Technology in Jaipur and obtained his PhD from IIT in Varanasi. He's interested in numbers, universe, and politics. Interesting combination. He started his career as an assistant armament supply officer with the Indian Navy, and he later joined as mechanical engineer with the Indian Railways. He then was posted as faculty for information technology at the National Academy of Indian Railways in Vadodara. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. Welcome here. Look forward to engaging you. And finally, two more. I'll be very happy to introduce Sri Shurab Chopra, who leads the government partnership team at Central Square Foundation, where his work involves working closely with various central government stakeholders and executing numerous national scale education projects. He has led multiple CSF engagements on the national education policy, national achievement surveys, Tic-Tac-Learn, etc. Prior to joining CSF, Surab built English Leap, an online learning application with catered to more than 2 million users. So you can speak of experience. Finally, and not least, we're very pleased to have Mrs. Manoranjan Gupta as our moderator for this session. Manora is a business consultant public politics and advocacy professional. Earlier, she was the associate editor of the Financial Express. She's currently associated with 3 companies and is the director of Creative Content Service Private Limited. Her excellence lies in deep understanding of the government processes, in-depth knowledge of policy formulation processes, first-hand experience of media, and appreciation of business and its needs. That being said, I think we have a wonderful panel from different parts of the world that can inform our debates. So thank you for that. In order to sort of set the stage, we wanted to share very briefly the key areas that we have pre-identified for areas of policy recommendation for us. Let me just briefly take you through them and then open the floor, hand over to Mano. So what we have seen as important elements is equity, access, quality, and affordability of education as an important theme that informs our work across C20, looking in particular at the most vulnerable populations. Second element, train individuals to use technology with discernment, addressing misuse and abuse. The notion of hygiene is probably relevant here. Technology is good, but you have to know how to use it. Third element, promote the use of technology for education by the workforce and citizens. Global recommendation. Specifically, also look at real-time monitoring at the work and at the country level in terms of education, education during crisis, or it is widely known in our circles as education during emergency. An important topic which is also very much worked on here in Geneva. I'm involved in these discussions as well. And finally, emerging technologies for practitioners, medical education, media education, gender, disability, etc. So it's a wide area, and it's very apropos that we have this exchange with you today. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Mano for the moderation. Thank you so much and see you later. Oh, there's one more to come, actually, sorry. One more slide, sorry, just to set the way we work. Excuse me for this. Purpose indeed, I said, is to really inform our work. 2 sets of questions will guide our work in the panels. What are the areas of policy recommendation you would advise us to work on, and specific recommendations you would like to share? And the second component of that question is to consider what are the barriers. If these are the recommendations, what are potential barriers and how to solve them? We'll try to wrap up the panel, and that is always a challenging task by key takeaways essential for us as we are writing our first policy document and want to be informed by you in terms of modalities. Since we have a very tight schedule, and I thank you for your understanding here, please be concise. My and Mano's role will be to make sure that we fit into the time frame, noting that there's another panel just after this one. And please, and I'd like to welcome the participants online again. Feel free to post comments and questions, which we will take up at the end of the session. That being said, I've already spoken too much, and the word is yours, Mano.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joost Monks, my dear colleague, for the wonderful and insightful introduction of all the esteemed panelists today. As you all know, and sounds a bit repetitive because Mr. Monks has already said that, civil society voice and evidence-based practices related to our subgroup called Technology-Enabled Learning and Future of Education form a very important part of the working group called Education and Digital Transformation. And therefore, they are also being considered in the C20 discussions and hold the possibility of being incorporated into the G20 Leaders Declaration as policy. So when our panelists speak, they must keep in mind the fact that they're contributing to a very important draft towards policy formulation. And of course, when they list their experiences and best practices, they create udaharans, which means examples for others to emulate. Let's now begin. Our first eminent panelist for today's discussion is Dr. William Poucher. Dr. Poucher, welcome to today's discussion on technology-enabled learning and the future of education. Being associated with the ICPC Foundation, in fact, being a co-founder there, you have a vast experience over 40 years, and your operations span across G20 nations. We are all waiting to hear your views.
Well, thank you very much for being here so that I could join you. And here I am actually in Texas due to the hyperdimensionality of the cyber millennium, I suppose, with a background actually from Dhaka, where we just had our world finals. There are so many important factors that go into successful education, but one of them is engagement and encouragement to view the world in a healthy framework. A few years ago, I was invited to an AI conference where I was able to give an overview of artificial intelligence. And I was asked about what threat did artificial intelligence pose to humanity? And I said, well, it depends on how you frame your investment. And if you ask the question, don't we all want to be happy? Well, then you're going to get a different outcome than if you frame the investment that you have in how do I prevent my neighbor from taking what I have. So our spirit and our belief in civilization that's based on community building and membership and unity of purpose is extraordinarily important. Now, of course, I'm involved, and I have been involved in probably the earliest form of the use of digital equipment in education. That is programming. You see, we interact with computers and we write languages so that people can express themselves and solve problems once and for all for their neighbors. And the ICPC started as an extracurricular activity, and simply because what we found is that students advance quickest when they're excited about doing the work that opens doors of understanding for them. Okay, and two, there's availability for that work. So having online judges to judge your solutions to problems and getting immediate feedback is a tremendous asset to students who have already committed to pursue excellence. Now, I always like to start back before I started teaching. And so let me turn the page back to Aristotle. Yes, I am actually younger than Aristotle. And Aristotle said that excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we have acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a trait. And what we find in the performance arts, and computer science is actually a performance art because we create things for people and it matters how well they perform, and we take great pride in the work that we have, is that performance arts typically involve coaching, practice, rehearsal, and performance. Just as in music or in sports, the same is true in computer science, in the art, if you would, of developing solutions for our neighbors' problems. So that turns out to be automatable in many areas, and in the primary area is access to good coaching. However, coaching to be good needs to inspire the heart. And so, for instance, there is the possibility of continued coaching using media like Zoom media, but you really need to be in the presence of the person that you're working with. So we try to use grassroots means to make sure that there's someone near you who can help you and encourage you to learn, but you also have access to others who might have expertise in certain areas. And so we have ICPC Educate, ICPC University Commons. We're making all of the problem sets that we have that go back 40 years available to anyone who can access the internet and who would find comfort and enjoyment and involvement in that. Competitive programming in the ICPC world is done by teams of 3 because learning how to couple your strengths to be stronger as a unit is important. In fact, it's probably one of the most important things that the students got out of participation. Now, the next area after, of course, coaching is training, and the faster the feedback, the better. That's another area where, frankly, we can help students do those repeated things to develop habits of excellence. We have to make sure that they don't really, that they don't fear excellence, because excellence is a matter of habituating and wanting to do better personally. And I know no other way of doing better than to compete with others who are better than you in an environment that promotes being happy. And that is in an environment where the ones that do a good job then teach the others how to perform as well. It's about uplifting. It's about caring. You know, it's about being affectionate, putting people first, and resolving problems to the benefit of each other. And so not only in the ICPC do we try to teach students how to perform better, okay, we want them to be happy and complete in their lives. Finally, on rehearsal, yes, what is rehearsal? Rehearsal is performing for your peers before you perform for your community, you see, and that's extraordinarily important. Internship programs are an example of these kinds of things. And if you skip rehearsal, then the embarrassment of going out and getting rattled and not performing well, you know, you just don't want to do that. So I recommend that areas that are performance centered, and there are many areas of education that enlighten the mind and add beauty, comfort, and continuity of life, for crying out loud. But if you're performance-based, don't pass up what Aristotle had to say and what works in areas of entertainment to make sure that society works as well. Did I take too much time? Oh, good.
Manu, you're mute.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Dr. Poucher. I loved your comment. Good coaching needs to inspire the heart so that our students perform to their best. Well said, quoting Aristotle. I now welcome Madam Meta Bayrik-Hawass. I hope I got the name correctly. Today's discussion. Madam, your organization's vision is a world in which every child attains the right to survival, protection, development, and participation. Your organization has inspired breakthroughs in the way the world treats children and to achieve a lasting change in their lives. We're waiting to hear your views on technology-based learning, how it can transform the art of learning and teaching, and the future of education.
Thank you, and hello to everyone from Oslo in Norway. It's nice to see you all. I want you to remember 4 words when I'm finished speaking today, and that is leave no one behind. I will start to frame the words, and then I will give you some examples before I will give you 4 advices. So, education is meant to give young people competence to face and handle the future. That includes the belief in the future and tools to be a part of the solutions. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, is the world's work agenda, which aim to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all within 2030. The SDGs motto is leave no one behind. These 4 important words are also the guiding principle working with the 2030 agenda. According to the UN, many of the barriers people face in accessing services, resources, and equal opportunities are not simply accidents of fate or lack of availability of resources, but rather the results of discriminatory laws, policies, and social practices that leave particular groups of people further and further behind. I believe the C20 and G20 should use the same motto as guiding principle, working for technology-enabled learning and the future for education. Operationalizing leave no one behind requires a comprehensive approach, including identifying who is being left behind and why. So what does leave no one behind look like in practice? Before I go out in the big global world, I would like to start in a country, and then in Norway, of course. So we experience diversity everywhere, within a country, within a city, within a school, and within a classroom. As a teacher in Norway, I am by law obliged to see each student needs. I have to identify who is being left behind and why. We call this adaptive teaching, which is an evolution of differentiation that focuses on the entire class while still responding to individual student needs. It involves knowing my students' prior levels of attainment and providing targeted support. Sounds difficult when I have 30 students in the classroom, I know. Well, but today's technology, we use computer algorithms as well as artificial intelligence to orchestrate the interaction with the learner and deliver customized resources and learning activities to address the unique needs of each learner. So this is one example. Another one is the use of language. Having a student in the classroom who doesn't have Norwegian as his or her first language. With technology-enabled learning, the student can participate as other students in the classroom, using translation into his or her mother tongue to learn Norwegian and the subject. Or if I have a student with hearing or vision disability, he or she will, with technology, be able to join the class and do the same tasks and be a part of the community. So with technology enabled learning, I can ensure that no one in my classroom is being left behind. And all my students are given competence to face and handle the future, and they are given tools to be a part of the future and solutions. So I wanted to take you all into the big world. We go globally. So I will use an example I work with in these days. In my job, I am developing a digital interactive learning tool on climate and environment. So the outcome is that students are aware that climate change is a violation of the right of the child, and to give students ways to act against climate change and how they can participate. So this is knowledge and competences that are relevant to all children in the world. And this is something we want to share with Save the Children International. So our plan, it was simple. We wanted to translate the content into English, whose country offices are able to adapt the content to their language and content. So easy, right? Well, it's not that easy. To use the digital learning tool, the country offices need knowledge how to host a website and the technical solution. The teacher, students, families, they need the internet connection, a tablet or a computer, skills to use the technology, and etc. So what we thought was easy are being a big hump in the way just to share a digital learning tool. So based on this, here are my advices, and it's 4 of them. So number 1, use Leave No One Behind as a guiding principle when working with technology-enabled learning and the future of education. Try to identify who is being left behind and why. Number 2, support and guide developed and undeveloped economies to use the same principle. Inequality is between developed and undeveloped economies, but also within a country. And number 3, address the digital divide and provide access to technology and internet connectivity for all students, schools, and teachers. And number 4, teacher training that guides teachers how to integrate technology in their practice based on the 21st century skills and with aim to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Manu, you're on mute again.
No, I'm extremely sorry. Thank you so much, Madam Mehta, for your 4 advices. I'm sure everybody agrees with you on all the 4. You want to stress on advocating for policies that promote equity and accessibility in education, including policies that address the digital divide and provide access to technology and internet connectivity, not just for the students alone, but to the entire ecosystem. Thanks again for your wonderful views. I would now like to invite and welcome Dr. Rajneesh Kumar, Department of Schools, Government of India. Sir, we are all waiting to hear from you about the kind of thrust that is being given to technology-assisted education by the Government of India under the new education policy, and also how you perceive the future of education in India, given the vast numbers that we cater to. And of course, a few words about the best practices that government exemplifies. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Perfectly.
thank you.
Well, of course, as all of you have already exemplified in your speeches, there is no denying the fact that the use of technology has to be for the very big principle of equity. Of course, technology has one big issue in India, that there is a lot of debate on technology creating a digital divide and there's more barrier. But the interesting thing is, it is technology alone which has the capacity and the capability to smartly remove all the barriers to education and skilling. So we have to use technology to adequately address the concerns of equality, equity, and the role of luck in a student's life. A role of luck means that to get a good teacher, to get a good school is so much good luck. But if we have excellent technology, education technology for low internet bandwidth connections, for a smaller smart device, it can really create wonders for the children. So what we are trying to do is build an online tutoring tool, AI-based chatbots, which have easy access to problem solving and conceptual understanding. Then multilingual tools are very important in a country, especially like ours. So if we have a multilingual tool which can very easily translate video content, audio content, textbooks to the native language of the child, it will really help the child in overcoming the digital divide. The future of work is very dangerous, also very exciting. You just cannot depend on a degree that you get at the age of 25. You have to be a lifelong learner. And to be a lifelong learner, one cannot go to school every time. So blended mode of learning is the future. And also, in this blended mode of learning, information literacy is the key. You don't know what is the right source. There is information overload. There's a hyper information. In fact, the problem of the last century was that people were misinformed because they had lack of source of information. And today people are misinformed because they have hyper information. So knowing what is the right source, differentiating between misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and the right information, that is another very, very important aspect where actually the C20 working group can really work on. Because this is an area which requires extensive resource, and also at many times you require a third-party intervention to have these kind of information literacy programs. So in the end, all I have to say is that I'm sure C20 working group will have agenda in place, but the most important thing is how to make a citizen a lifelong learner. How does the citizen get information literacy, and blended mode of learning is the future, and how to make best use of it for every person, at least in a country like India. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajneesh, for your valuable points. I think you underlined that technology alone can solve most of our problems, and that we are discussing today in the education sector. In India, you said the challenge is to build multilingual content because we are such a vast country. And you said that we are doing that successfully. Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Saurabh Chopra, Project Director, Central Square Foundation, a CSO that believes in an evidence-led system change, engaging with the system to drive sustainable and positive impact, and collaborating with other ecosystem stakeholders to create an effective and proven scientific tools around critical issues. Welcome, Mr. Chopra. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here with an esteemed panel. So let me start by saying that I personally feel that technology hasn't delivered for education as we had expected it to. If you look at any other field around us, whether it's commerce or anything in our day-to-day life, we've seen technology being a very integral part of our lives. Whereas in the field of education, even today we debate whether it's what is good technology, what is good edtech. We still not understood what is working, what is not working. So I have a few thoughts on what could be the way forward, and what we should focus on. So the first is there's always been this debate about teachers and technology, and there's always been this thought that technology can replace teachers. I strongly believe that that cannot be the case, right? We have we are very fortunate to have 9.5 million teachers in India, and if technology were to replace teachers, then we won't need to hire any new teachers or train our teachers. But the fact is that technology has to be a supplement to the teachers and not a substitute. And that said, if technology has to support our teachers, we have to support our teachers become more tech savvy. So whether it's during their own training programs, or it's during their course of their careers, we have to support our teachers understand technology and how it can be used in the classroom. I think the second point why I feel technology hasn't delivered and what we can do in the future is more research on what works, what doesn't work. Right now there is there are multiple, on last count, I think there were 4,000 different, education apps targeting mathematics for the Indian curriculum on the Google Play Store, right? So there is a lot of different kind of technology content available, but we still don't have a credible way of identifying what's working and what's not working. I think that's probably, that should be the key focus right now, for different use cases. What is the kind of content, what is the kind of, technology which will work. The third one I'll talk about is, inclusivity, right? I mean, like Mithya talked about, there is, differences between a country, between a city, between a school, between a classroom. And when you look at the country of India's size, I mean, we have more than 20 languages as mediums of instructions. We have, small cities, and we have, large cities, and we have small towns and small villages, and the needs are very, very different, right? And if we don't focus on inclusivity, then technology would end up creating more inequity than solves the equity problem. So we have to make sure that whatever we focus on is available to the last child in the village, is available in all languages, and we've tested it out so that we know it works. Lastly, I also want to talk about, given the proliferation of technology during COVID, we've realized that there's a lot of mis-selling which can happen. And it's very important that we safeguard, the buyers from exaggerated claims. So there, needs to be some light regulation around how do we safeguard the interest of the students. And going forward, it's very, very important to make sure that the students using technology or teachers using technology are safe, and their privacy is ensured, and everybody can learn in a research-backed and efficient way, very safely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chopra, for your fantastic address. You pointed out that technology usage needs to be optimized. And yet at the same time, technology needs to supplement our teachers, and no way can it replace the teacher in the classroom. We now move on to another esteemed speaker, and she's our last speaker on the panel today, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee of Pratham. Welcome, Dr. Rukmini, to today's discussion. We hope you will give us a quick insight into the working of Pratham to begin with, move on to policy recommendations that you want included in the white paper that's being prepared under C20, and also suggest how we can overcome the possible barriers that we may have to face during the implementation of these policy suggestions. We may also request you to place some of your best practices at Pratham as udaharans for others to follow. Dr. Banerjee.
Thank you so much for including us in this discussion. One of the advantages of coming last is almost everything that is worth saying has already been said. So it is my job to reinforce or pull some threads that people have already mentioned. Just a quick word on policy formation. It's been a topic of some interest to me, but how do policies get formed? And today, listening to all the other panelists, I think we are going about it in the way that I think is best, which is looking at what practices actually work on the ground. What is it that we can do? What are the gaps or the difficulties we see, and build from there? Because very often policies are made thinking of some vision in the distance, but not taking into account where we are today. So I think that's a very positive way to start this conversation. I also want to, I think there's a formula everybody's used of 4 things, so I should also stick to that formula. On the question of access or equality, I think everybody has mentioned it. I wanted to add a few things that we have learned over the last few years. And I think the last years of the pandemic have actually been a big accelerated learning for all of us in so many different ways in this thinking about technology. In India today, a very, very large proportion of households have a phone. I think the number is probably above 90% now. And during the pandemic, we did a number of different studies where we found that even if there is a smartphone in the family, often it is not accessible to the child or often to the women either. We know that during, at least in India, between 2020 and 2021 in rural India, number of cell phones actually doubled in families. But even with that, almost a quarter of children did not have any access to a cell phone, and about 50% had some, but not a certain access. So I think the fact that there may be connectivity and there may be devices does not ensure that children, especially younger children, or women get access. So I think one thing that we've been thinking of, and I would call it a practice rather than maybe a policy is a big word, is that we should think about device libraries in schools or in panchayats or in villages, where these can be collectively used for different purposes by different population groups. And even at our current level of resources, I think whether at the school level or at the village level, owning for the school or for the village, a number of different tablets or whatever the device may be, is not unthinkable. So that would be one way in which we can assure. I think a second one which we learned, and I think the first speaker highlighted that while there may be wonderful content out there, unless you're motivated to learn and engaged in learning, you won't access that content. And during COVID, we worked with almost 10,000 villages and with as many people directly connected to these. And we largely worked because we knew that everybody has a phone, but we worked with SMS. And I have to say that during that period, we learned a lot, because in an SMS, you can only send whatever it is, the message you're sending, in 160 or so characters. It's amazing how creative you can be in 160 characters. But the different messages we sent out every day, we would call families once a week or once in 2 weeks to find out if they had opened the message. That's one first big part. And then if they'd opened the message, which of the activities did they find was useful? We are known for a method of teaching called teaching at the right level. And I would say that during COVID, what we really learned was how important it is to reach at the right level. Because there would be messages that we would think was, a very interesting activity. But when we heard repeatedly from thousands of parents, we realized that if you want to create an environment of engagement around learning in the home, then the less textbook-like you are, the more engagement there is actually with kids. So I would say that this two-way sending of a message through very low tech and then using the low tech way of talking, which is on the phone, gave us a lot of richness of what kind of content actually encourages families to engage with children. We work with largely primary or pre-primary school children, and therefore these were very, very simple activities. But I would think that we had a huge acceleration in thinking about how to connect, how to engage, how to motivate, how to persist, and how to bring more people into this kind of learning network through even very low tech. One thing I want to say because Saurabh also mentioned about what works. So during COVID, we felt that these SMS messages were really engagement. We were really staying in touch, and maybe it just made us feel good that we were doing something where nothing was possible. But we also did a very small kind of in-house randomized control trial in 1,000 villages, where in 300, there was nothing. 300 got SMS messages for a month, and 300 got SMS messages plus a call every week. And very, very surprisingly, we found that this call plus the message actually helped learning go up. It wasn't a huge increase, but it was significant and substantial, particularly for primary school children who were learning how to do basic math. So I think just following up things that the experience shows is good with a little bit of, rigorous methodology, I think is helpful. So engagement is a must, and learning, whether it's only engagement or it is a value add, I think is essential. The third point is, I feel technology, and I'm not a tech person, but I feel technology should enable us to do what traditional systems and methods and ways of instruction don't enable us to do. And I think a key feature of that is non-linearity. You should, in a textbook, you have to go from chapter 1 to chapter 8. But if you're not tied to a physical linearity, you could jump up and down and go in whichever way we want. Our Indian textbooks now are QR coded. So it is possible actually to use the same material, but not use it in a linear way. The other thing that we've noticed is in a traditional classroom, students are striving for individual performance and individual excellence. But again, during COVID and during some of the work we do outside schools, we see that group dynamics often helps. And I think, again, Dr. Poucher mentioned this, that when you work as a team, learning is best done as a team. And we find that using aspects of devices such as, for example, children don't like writing, but we found very, very productive ways of getting kids to make videos, which they script and they put together and they craft, which actually gets around this old-fashioned thing, maybe, of writing. And my final point, and this could be a point mainly for India, but I think it is actually relevant to other parts of the world. We have an SDG 4, but we have an SDG 4.1A, which says that we need to have foundational literacy and numeracy for kids at a very early age. Otherwise, and our new education policy very nicely puts it to say that if you don't achieve this by 3rd grade, then the rest of the policy is irrelevant. I almost feel the SDGs should say the same thing, that this is the building block for education in the world. And if we don't achieve this and don't achieve this quickly in the next 5 to 10 years, we will have lost a whole generation. And I think a large part of our, at least edtech industry in India, is looking at exam preparation and doing very well at a higher education level. So I would urge, and again, this is not a policy, this is just a call to action, to say that let's think about how we can build foundational literacy, numeracy. There is a big momentum on in the country right now, but how can experiments in technology involving families, parents, siblings, engage in this task? Because if we can get this building block done, then I think many more things will become possible. Back to you, Manoranjana.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banerjee. You've said that the best practices are the best way to move forward. Point noted by everybody. Everybody agrees. You've also rightly said that the pandemic has given us a tremendous jump in terms of switching to tech-enabled learning. And your proposal for device library is excellent, and I'm sure it would get picked up. Thank you so much for all your suggestions. We've now heard the valuable suggestions of our 5 very, very eminent speakers. As has been pointed out by almost all our speakers today, there are challenges ahead, and there are specific actions that need to be taken. And the key takeaways from today's discussion will now be summarized by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Prema Nidangadi. Over to Dr. Prema.
Thank you so much, Manoranjana. Each of the panelists represents best practices, experts in your areas. It was wonderful to hear from each of you. From Dr. William Poucher, from Amrita, we have been working with ICPC for so many years. The ICPC pedagogy focuses on problem-solving skills, collaboration, competitive and real-time environment. What we find is these are the students that actually get better jobs or get into higher education at top universities globally. It's really not the ones who score higher marks. So this pedagogy of competitive programming, along with the problem solving and the mentoring that happens, we have technical clubs based on it, is definitely very high quality workforce is what it builds. And yes, Ms. Metter, regarding the access, very important points. Was surprised to hear it from your country also. Leave no one behind. Internet access, tablets, reduce inequality between haves and have-nots. Absolutely. We are not just looking at the G20 countries. We are hoping to be able to understand also from Africa and other countries so that our policy recommendations can be globally beneficial. Thank you. Dr. Rajneesh, of course, as part of MOE that came out with a futuristic NEP 2020 plan that the country is really making a big difference. I completely agree that technology can be used for scale and quality. It's not about replacing schools. It's not about replacing teachers. It is about scaling. It is about supporting teachers. It's about supporting education. It's about access, self-learning. So yes, absolutely. Excellent technology for low internet, AI-based chatbots, multilingual tools, all of that are important, not only for India, but for many other countries. In fact, if we did French and Spanish, we would be able to help a lot of countries that are with lower socioeconomic background. Yes, information literacy, digital literacy, literacies, we would say, because we would include the health literacy, financial literacy, and a whole lot of literacies along with the information literacy are key. Going on to Dr. Saurabh, teachers are needed, very true. Very well-trained teachers are needed is what we would say. In fact, when we had our earlier panel on inclusive education, we were saying even the regular B.Ed curriculum should have special education or inclusion and other things incorporated into it. So currently it's like a specialized degree, with special education in bracket for B.Ed. But this is something, if you want to make inclusive classrooms, it has to come in into every teacher training, along with post-training of existing teachers. And very good points from you, sir, on research. It's so important what content works, what does not. And NGOs and academia collaborations perhaps can help to achieve this better and faster. And from Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, such valuable comments. What you talked about connectivity, devices, device libraries that can be used by different populations. At Amrita, what we have tried in our adopted villages is tablets that are owned, with a teacher, but then used by all the children after school, and with content in their native languages. And of course, in India, we have an advantage that data is really cheap compared to other countries. So we need to worry about devices. Smartphones, I think, can be done. And then, of course, connectivity, which the government has taken up in a big way to rural areas. Foundation literacy, numeracy, yes, a very important point that you mentioned. If it is not there by grade 3, it's so important that we take it there. And there are so many populations where the parents are low literate, and and the schools could be improved also. So I think that is a huge problem or challenge that needs to be resolved. And Dr. Rukmini, you also talked about personalized learning. Yeah, it was just a thought that while we have adaptive learning systems and software to do this, maybe it is more useful if the results of that personalization is actually provided to a teacher in a rural area, so that some action can be done without technology also. Anyway, thank you so much. Excellent inputs, and all of you gave your inputs back based on your real experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prema. That was a real insight and a good summary of what has been said by all our esteemed speakers. Over to my colleague, Dr. Monks, who is going to actually take up a few questions that the audience has raised.
Absolutely.
Over to you.
Thank you so much, Manuel. Thank you, Abby, for this very enlightening discussions. There's a number of questions. Considering time, I would just like to raise 2 questions at this point from the audience. One is, given the nature of the work C20, G20, are there areas in particular you see where we can engage amongst countries of the G20? What are the potential areas of collaboration on digital education amongst countries. So that would be one. The second is there's a question being raised about the lack of funding for creating the infrastructure to enable tech-based learning. Question is, what can we do about that? You know, what are sort of probably initiatives already out there? I know some foundations, including those ones represented here, work in this space, but it's a much broader question. And how can that barrier be taken care of? So these two questions, international cooperation, and in particular barriers towards funding for building infrastructures. Who would like to take these questions?
Maybe I can take the first one.
Yes, please.
So, regarding the cooperation for, between the different countries, I feel, research could be one area, because learning mathematics, right, will not be very different, at least the science of learning. If you look at, social media today and the kind of personalization they have for advertisements or, just tracking consumers through the life cycle, if the same kind of personalization in the science comes in learning, languages or mathematics, that would be super useful. And if that could be more of a shared research, I believe that will help everybody.
Thank you. Regarding the lack of funding on the infrastructure, any projects or experience or suggestions to share? Anyone feels called by this question? I don't see anyone react. Okay.
Dr. Monks, one more question, and I think any of the speakers would be very, very happy to answer that. Somebody has raised this question saying, that we need to advocate for privacy and security policies that protect student data and also ensure the responsible use of technology in education and prevent its abuse. Anybody who could take that question?
Perhaps this is tangential, but one of the most important things that we need to do is to always make certain that in education that there is the touch that was alluded to by many, the touch of the heart, the pat on the back, the encouragement for personal development. And one challenge that we run into over my lifetime is that computing has allowed us to take metrics that were very helpful to measure personal improvement and create what you might call a metricocracy. That is, that the metric actually became more important than the students' development. And I think that one of the great challenges that we face, and that one of the sources of investment that will come, is when parents and communities see with their own eyes the improvement of life in their community and opportunity for their children. So in the long haul, the simplest metrics are going to be the metrics that that answer the questions of the heart. And in the meantime, though, we're not going to get there unless there are exploratory as well as programmatic investment. And the faster that we get there, and the faster that we interconnect, so that kids can visit our library on the internet, as well as interact at home, the better.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to conclude this panel by thanking you all very much again for your time and your information. Please share your written notes with us if you can. We have registered this session, but any further inputs from you would be very much appreciated. I also like to thank Bill in particular, speaking to the heart, just to quote a famous Swiss pedagogist, Pestalozzi. He said education is about the heads, the hands, and the heart. And in our education systems today, we tend to forget certain dimensions of education. So stressing this dimension, I think, is part of the recommendations that we will clearly put forwards. Thanking you all very much again. Thank you in particular also, Manu, for moderating this session and for staying within the time limits. Actually, our next panel is about to start in 10 minutes. It's the last panel for today. It's on digital transformation. And I invite you please to stay on and attend that final session before we go into the general conclusion of this day. That being said, thanks so much and wish you all a wonderful day. Namaste.
Thank you.
So we have a 10 minutes break now, basically. Yeah.
One
Yes, please. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh, forgot. Oh, I forgot the picture, please. Can we just all turn on our cameras so that we can take a group picture as a conclusion of this panel? And Amal will let us know when that is done. Amal, are we done? You got it? I don't get any feedback. I presume it's fine. Amal? Yes? Okay. Thank you so much. And hope to see you in 10 minutes for our final panel on digital transformation.